Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Buckeye Weekly Podcast. I'm Tony Gerdeman, here as always with Tom. Tom, how's it going?
Tony, I'm really great, but there's just one thing I can go for right now.
What's that, Tom?
A smash burger.
A smash burger. You know what, Tom? If you'd like a smash burger, I know the perfect place.
Oh?
Almost. It is the Grateful Griddle, oh.com. The Grateful Griddle, a fantastic place to get that sort of thing. You want a smash burger, you can do that. It's a Grateful Griddle, a newest sponsor here for us at Buckeye Weekly. Buckeye fans, Grateful Griddle is here to take your events to the next level, whether it's a wedding, a corporate event, or a birthday party. Their Columbus food truck catering serves up mouth-watering smash burgers, Tom.
Hey, that's what I was just hoping to eat.
Well, you know what? Once we get out of here, head back to Columbus. Grateful Griddle is the place to be. So, mouth-watering smash burgers, customizable menus, and unbeatable service. Head to gratefulgriddleoh.com and let them handle the flavor while you enjoy the fun. Tom, let them handle the flavor while you enjoy the fun. Like we could enjoy the fun of this show while they handle the smash burgers, and then Tom, how many smash burgers for, say, $75 in super chats? Like you could do 4 smash burgers easy in like 20 minutes.
You could do 4 smash burgers in 20 minutes? Wow, Tony, that's impressive. I would like to see that.
Tom, name that tune.
How about for that tune, Tony? Its name is Chilean Stud. I don't make the users' names. It's just this is what we got at Chilean Stud 11. Should Ohio State build a roof over the Horseshoe? The way the offense is built looks better, and nice weather makes me think it would be a benefit both on and off the field. Will they ever replace the shoe? So, will they ever replace the shoe? I mean, if we're talking about, in the foreseeable future, no. If we're talking about between now and the heat death of the universe, probably. But, you are at some point. They just sunk a bunch of money into it. Mm-hmm. So this is not a next 10 years, next 20 years kind of conversation. In the year 2080, are they still playing in Ohio Stadium? I mean, I can't say yes for sure. Like, probably, balance of probability, yeah, probably in, 55, 60 years, sure. At that point, is it my problem? Probably not. So, in our lifetime, I'm going to say much more likely they continue to play in Ohio Stadium rather than don't play, they don't play somewhere else. I think it would be almost impossible to retrofit a roof onto the current structure. I mean, I'm not a structural engineer, but I can't imagine, when you look at what a pain in the butt it is and how they were limited in terms of what they could do with, some of the new 1922 club that they're putting in. It's like, would they like it to have a view of the stadium? Probably. Does it? No, because it is what it is, and it's in the stadium where it is. And you're working around a 102-year-old structure at this point, 103-year-old structure later this year. So, you're not going to be able to put a roof on it. Would they benefit from that under the current offense? Yes. What is we're talking about what is the stadium going to look like in 20 years? What's the offense going to look like in 20 years? Because I can tell you, 20 years ago, when Jim Tressel was running the Ohio State program, no one was worried about, what about the wide open passing attack, Tony? Won't someone think of the wide open passing attack?
No. When Jim Tressel took over, he was worried about the winds in certain corners affecting the punt. That's what he was focused on. So that's, that may eventually be back to what it is, what the focus is. Tom, what about some canvas awnings? Like the Roman Coliseum. Some awnings.
I've been to the Roman Coliseum. They do not have canvas awnings there anymore.
No, I know not now, but back in the day, something like that. I'm the guy that said, hey, they should play all their postseason games in Lucas Oil because of the fast track and the perfect weather. But then they went out and torched Tennessee to try to prove me wrong, specifically. Yeah. And so that worked out well for me and Ohio State. But yeah, there is no amount of money that can be put towards a stadium anymore the way college football is. Like, it all has to go back to the student athletes. And so, like, there have been so many buildings put up around Ohio State on campus over the last 20 years Not anymore. Like it's you can't even afford to put in a new football stadium unless you're like Vanderbilt. It's 30,000 or Northwestern, and you have a billionaire sugar daddy to do it.
Yeah, I kind of just want to like put you in a headlock and like give you noogies right now because it's just so adorable how you're speaking with great certainty about the future. 20 years from now, what conference is Ohio State in, and what other members are in that conference, and what members are not in that conference?
Are you saying there's like a ton of money available, and so they're just like printing it and basically, you know what? We should have a stadium for Monday, a stadium for Tuesday, a stadium for Wednesday.
I mean, I'm not saying that they're going to. You're correct about the current state of affairs, where you're not sinking a ton of money into capital projects. They right now would love to build an ice rink, a new ice rink for the women's hockey program, men's hockey program. Maybe have a couple sheets of ice so you can service the local community and rent out your ice, all that kind of stuff. That got brought up a couple of years ago, and I think there's been some progress towards it, but I don't, normally it was like Ohio State needs to raise whatever, $50 million, $60 million for a thing. It was kind of like they rattled the tin cup for about 45 minutes and then they had the money. And here we are a couple of years later, and you haven't heard like, oh boy, look, we've got a groundbreaking scheduled for 3 months from now, or like, hey, they're doing, there's any kind of real significant progress. Everything is probably a little bit on hold. It's like, if you were trying to sell your house, you may have missed when the market was hot, when money was free, and so now that interest rates are up, it's like, boy, it's harder to sell my house now, and everything's sitting on the market a little longer. You may have missed your window to do the building of that kind of stuff right now. Market is cyclical. At some point, Ohio State is going to kick Rutgers and Purdue to the curb, and then it's going to be the Ohio State, Penn State, Oregon, Texas, Alabama conference, and or it's going to be two conferences of like 10 teams, but also Clemson's going to be there, and Florida State, and whatever it looks like. And then there probably is more money, and then what is that money going towards? Is that just going towards players, or is there more money for faith? These are all the questions that factor into this kind of a question, and I at this point I don't know what I can say with any real high degree of certainty about broad strokes college football and like college football the next 5 to 10 years. What are you like 100% certain is going to happen in the next 5 to 10 years, like broad strokes with the sport of college football? Because for me, it's like,
I just know it'll be here, and that's it. That's the one thing I'm sure about. And even the projects that you're talking about, like Nadine Muswell, the women's hockey coach at Ohio State, she said Ross Bjork has told her there will be a new arena. No idea when. Yeah. But we'll get you one. I just can't tell you when.
And that's a program that's won 2 of the last 3 national championships. So that's a program that is, if you really don't follow it all and you're like, women's hockey, what? That is a very, very, very successful program.
And where they have to play?
Oh yeah, they play in the same rink that if you ever went to Ohio State and played intramural ice hockey or went public skating, and back in the 90s were like, hey, this is kind of old and run down.
Yes.
Well, I have been down in the locker room areas and all that down there somewhat recently, because it's the same place where my kid plays hockey sometimes. Like, this is the national championship team sharing locker rooms with, like, hey, here's my kid's hockey team. Like, it is a facility that is probably 30 years overdue for being upgraded, and so they have to, and you're going to run into stuff where the Schottenstein Center at some point, the compressors there are getting to be replaced. That's not cheap. That is an expensive process, and they would probably prefer to not have to replace them there, and then 5 years later build a new rink. So there is a little bit of a ticking clock here. Boy, this is a lot more hockey than I expected to be talking on this show, but here we are.
Hey, it was a question.
It was not about hockey, but somehow, Tony, as always in my life, it manages to turn into hockey at some point. Next one from @Chip Roush. Probably won't be 8 this game, but there have been lots of sacks recently. Who will be defending brackets holding without getting called against JT Tuimoloau out? He does not like JTT at all. What is the strength of the Texas offensive line?
I think the strength, this is a very good Texas offensive line. Jake Majors was a Remington semifinalist or finalist at center. Kelvin Banks, their left tackle. Cameron Williams, right tackle. Kelvin Banks was an award winner in a couple of national awards, so he's very good, but he's been banged up. Cameron Williams has been banged up. Don't really hear much about the guards. And the fact that, how good can they be if they're not able to run that well? So I think there's some concern there. But the way Jack Sawyer and JT Tuimoloau are playing right now, so in their 2 playoff games, they've combined for 7.5 sacks.
Is that a lot?
It is a lot.
It sounds like a lot.
The blemish there is 1.5 sacks for Jack Sawyer in one of the games. They've had 2 in every other game, but
Blemish.
I'm just
Yeah.
relative.
Yeah.
And then in their three postseason games for Texas, they've given up 11 sacks, 6 against Georgia, 2 against Clemson, and I think 3 against Arizona State. So they've been giving up some sacks, and I would equate this defense more to Georgia than to Arizona State or Clemson. So, boy, if they get to Quinn Ewers 6 times, then you're looking at another blowout. I'm not saying that's going to happen, but the potential is there. And it depends on how healthy this offensive line is. They've been banged up, as we know, so they need to be as healthy as they can be. I don't know if I guess they'll be as healthy as they can, but I don't know how healthy that actually is. They'll both be playing. Kellen Banks and Cameron Williams, I assume, will both be playing in this one, and good to go. But for how long?
Yeah, and just to put some context around those numbers, Georgia, which had, like you said, I think 6 sacks in that SEC championship game, 28th in the nation in sacks per game. Clemson is 38th, and Arizona State is 88th.
Okay.
Ohio State is 3rd.
Is that?
That's higher.
They're higher.
They're
okay.
higher, yes. So, I think I'm not expecting 8 sacks again, but if they get to 5 or 6, that's probably, you got to remember, this is a Texas team that is not running the ball well. If you get them behind the sticks, then you're putting all the pressure on Quinn Ewers, and there's going to be a lot of pressure on Quinn Ewers anyway. You're also putting a lot more pressure on that offensive line. If you're behind the sticks, guess what? That is, Ohio State can bring pressure. And we have seen teams, if you drop into coverage against Quinn Ewers and he has time, he can sit there and pick you apart. If you bring pressure on him, he's got to get it out quick. That's not necessarily where he wants to be.
He'll throw some yellow balls.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. And even deep shots, he'll hang them up there a little bit. If you get pressure in his face and get him throwing off platform, he can get a little squirrely.
Was it the Arizona State game where like all of the deep shots hung up and they were just
Yeah.
receivers were having to wait on them and defensive backs were able to catch up to them?
Yep.
That would be a bad spot for him in this game.
Yeah. Next up from @GoBucksBurson, what is the difference in the tone of the team today versus last week's media session? So the tone in the, we're going to be talking to him later on, but the tone of the team this week as opposed to last week's media session, hope they're just as locked in.
Yeah, I don't know why they wouldn't be at this point now that you're here. Like, they haven't won this game yet. And as they keep saying, people have been saying great things, but if you lose this game, then none of the others mattered. And it's still not just this game. You got one more after this one. So I don't think they're going to be, smelling their own perfume, if you will, and basking in their glory, because I think the coaches have also, they're watching that, and the leaders are watching that, the seniors that came back, like, they haven't won anything, so I don't think that they're all happy. Look, winning the Rose Bowl, you saw all of the emotion coming out, but that was a huge game, and it was exacting some revenge on Oregon. You played fantastic, but it was just, you just completed the second checkpoint. Like, you're halfway to your goal. So I would assume, based on the way they've operated in these first 2 postseason games, they're going to have that same kind of mentality. I don't think that they're happy to be here.
No, and this is not a young team where this is the first time they've ever won a big game, and it's like, oh boy, now we're awesome. Everything's great. Like, I talked to Emeka Egbuka on the field after the Rose Bowl, and just did like a short little, like, minute and a half interview with him that if you watched our post-game show, you saw. But I talked about the offensive line. I asked him about the offensive line, and, are you surprised? I know you guys believe in your teammates, but are you surprised that an offensive line has been so mix and match? And he answered it in a way that it was like, we don't listen to what you guys are saying, we don't listen to what outside. Like, there's still an edge there. There's still a chip there. And I think that's probably going to carry over. And the thing that maybe brought into, stark relief the veteran nature of this team. Like, it's one of those things you look around the field and you're like, yeah, these are all these guys who are back from last year. They put up a graphic during the Rose Bowl broadcast where it was, hey, Cody Simon's a fifth year, and then here's all these guys who are fourth years and guys who've been like 2-3 year starters for this team on defense. And yeah, Caleb Downs is in his first year on this defense. Davison Igbinosun is up his second year on this defense. There might have been one guy who was a third year, and everyone else was in their fourth year. These guys have been around. These guys have seen it. These guys have their stated goals, and their stated goals are beat Michigan, which they went 0-4 on, win the Big Ten, which they went 0-4 on, and win the national championship, which they still have to win 2 more to get there. So I think the focus is probably not going to be an issue. And this is, you're not. I think you would have much more reason for concern if you were talking about an Ohio State-Arizona State game.
Just going to say the same thing.
If it's Ohio State-Arizona State in the semifinals and everyone's going, oh, you're a 27-point favorite. Guess what? There's a lesson. There's an object lesson in being a 21-point favorite that they could have drawn from recently. But they're not a 21-point favorite. They're like a 6.5-point favorite, something like that. So yeah, they're favored, but they've, you only have to go back a month and a half to look at the fact that doesn't actually credit you any points at the start of the game.
Yeah, you're going to be playing Texas in the Cotton Bowl. So if you're not ready for that and you're not awake for that, then you will get knocked out.
Well, and this is also, you had the crowd in Ohio Stadium where it was 25% or whatever, 30% Tennessee fans, and they drew something from that. And then the Rose Bowl, it was like 60% Oregon fans. They drew something from that. This is going to be probably 60% Texas fans. I'm just ballparking that. But
well, I know some Ohio State fans have backed out of this game because of the weather concerns.
Yeah. So this is going to be, potentially not a total road atmosphere, but a, between neutral and road type atmosphere here. So there will be plenty of, motivation. There will be plenty of stuff to give them an edge and let them nobody believes in us and all of that kind of stuff. And
everybody's doubted us. We're underdogs all year long. It's like, well, you've been a favorite all year long. So whatever you want to tell yourself.
Yeah, right. Yeah. But I think that it would be pretty surprising if a team this veteran came. That does not insulate them from like, hey, you make one bad throw and it gets run back for a touchdown. Like, it still counts for 7 points whether you were focused or not.
I did see, you mentioned ESPN on the previous show. Mm-hmm. I did see a question on one of the shows, like, if Ohio State doesn't win it all this year, was it a bust or something like that? It doesn't matter how far you make it. It's just that people are always willing to, like, well, you didn't do enough, and so this was a failure. Like, yes, this has been a fantastic season for Ohio State, but I do think the seniors would view it as a failure if they don't get this done. So I think that alone will keep them locked in.
Yeah. I mean, Denzel Burke has talked about the natty or bust mentality. Well, there are only 2 choices there, so
hence the or.
Yes. I did not write down the name for this one, so I apologize. Do you think the freshman of the year, Colin Simmons, will have a big enough impact on the game?
Well, and that goes back to the previous episode, I believe, where I singled out Josh Fryer as an X factor in this, because if they can limit him, and if we're talking about, when we talk about Colin Simmons, we can talk about him in the same vein we talked about with Abdul Carter, James Pierce. Abdul Carter for Penn State, he had the 2 quick sacks against Donovan Jackson, but didn't do much outside of that. James Pierce did nothing as a pass rusher for Tennessee against Ohio State. So if they can limit Colin Simmons to the way they limited James Pierce in Ohio State, again, it feels pretty good about their chances in this game. But he's fast, he's athletic, he will he gets to the quarterback very quickly, and he's not like if Ryan Shazier played defensive end, that's kind of a little bit of what he is. But if they can limit him, then I like Ohio State's chances. But what kind of impact do you think he has to have in order to change the game for Texas?
I think you've got to have. He probably needs to have at least 1 sack and participate in one other, something like that. I mean, you need. It can't just be one play, because I think this is a game where Texas is going to struggle to. This is not like a break serve kind of game to me for the Ohio State defense. I think Texas is going to score some, but not score to the point where it's like, oh wow, they forced a punt. That's remarkable. I think this is going to be a game where Texas is going to have to try and win this 20-17 kind of thing rather than being able to win at 34-31. So it's going to be can he stop or be a part of stopping, say, 2 drives for Ohio State, and then other guys have got to do it too.
Yeah.
But that's kind of where if he like has 1 sack, it's like that's great. What about the other 5 drives where you probably need to get stops in this game? And you probably need to get stops in like 5 drives and force field goals and a couple others. I mean, that's and even that's you might be looking at that's 21, 24, 27 points. I mean, that might be too many. So you really there's a lot of pressure, I think, on the Texas defense in this game, and it's a great defense.
Yeah.
I want to make sure we keep saying that. Like this is a very, very talented Texas defense and Texas defense in front. But I think there's going to be a lot of pressure on them to get Ohio State behind the chains and then get off the field on 3rd down.
And also, if he does say have 2 sacks, what are they? Is it first down or is it 3rd down? Because those are 2 very different things. Are you ending a drive, or are you just making Ohio State pick up a long second and 13 or second and 14, which they can't do with 2 plays to go. So when do those happen? But he is good enough to impact this game in a big way for Texas. I mean, we kind of joked about him being the freshman of the year over Jeremiah Smith, but he has had an impact in these games for Texas all season long. So he's somebody that Ohio State has to be very focused on. And Josh Fryer had some struggles a little bit against Oregon a little bit with their pass rush, and he's got to step up in this one. And he's been really, really solid all year long. So if you don't hear much from Colin Simmons, then this is an Ohio State win, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think that's definitely one of the things that would sort of check something off that list. And I figured out why I didn't have a name on that one.
Yes.
Because these 2 were both questions from the same person, and that was at teach_B for you. Who are you anticipating will need to have his best game on offense and defense for Ohio State to win on Friday? I think we should probably exclude the folks that we talked about on the last show, Sonny Styles and Carson Hinsman and Josh Fryer, because boy, I think Josh Fryer would probably be my answer on this one. But if have to have his best game, I don't know if Will Howard has to have his best game, but if he does, boy, that would go a long way towards telling me that they're going to win the game. I think you could take your pick of the guards on offense, and I don't even know how to rank them because they just sort of shuffle them in different orders. But the interior of that defensive line being so good for Texas, Vernon Broughton especially. I mean, number 45, he is just you see him in the backfield a lot. I think the people are now taking the interior of the Ohio State offensive line for granted to a certain degree, which
is crazy.
3 weeks ago that was like, boy, what is the $64,000 question for the Ohio State offensive line? And they haven't been annihilating people, but they've been fine. They've been plenty good enough against a couple pretty good interior defensive lines. Omar Norman Lott for Tennessee, and then Derek Harmon.
Those are really good polls. Those are games ago, man.
And then Jamari Caldwell and Derek Harmon for Oregon. I mean, these are guys we've been talking about, and before these games, about like, boy, we've seen these guys really blow things up. And the Ohio State offensive line never let those guys blow things up. So if they can just, this is probably the best interior of the defensive line that we've seen so far. They've played a bunch of good, and you can go back to the Michigan game. The interior of the Michigan defensive line is very good. So this is a guard tandem and a center who have played a lot of good interior of the defensive lines over the last month and a half. But if those guards, and whichever guard or guards you want to throw on this list, if those guards have their best game yet, that's probably going to go a long way towards letting Ohio State run the ball at least a little bit inside, but also keeping Will Howard upright and letting those receivers kind of work downfield.
How about Quinshon Judkins? It's been a while since he's had a game where you're just like, you ride him to a victory. He hasn't had his last game of 6 yards per carry was Penn State. And his last 100-yard game was Marshall. So this is a guy that has been not quiet. I mean, he's rushed for 924 yards, 5.3 yards per carry. He was really good against Oregon, 85 yards, 34 yards against Tennessee. So if he has one of those games where you ride him to victory, then that would be great. I asked Chip Kelly after the Rose Bowl, was this Will Howard's best game? And he, after thinking about it, he said, I hope not. And so, yeah, if this is Will Howard's best game, then can Ohio State lose if Will Howard plays his best game? I don't, based on the way this offense is going, probably not. The way the Texas offense is going, probably not. But again, I don't know that you can expect Will Howard to play his best game against the best defenses. But Ohio State has been playing their best games against the best teams. Yeah. Now, I will say, I was having lunch today or breakfast, I forget which, and I heard a Texas writer say, Texas still hasn't played their best game yet. It could happen this week, and I'm thinking, I don't know that you should expect the best game for Texas to come against their best opponent. Just as you should not expect Ohio State's best game to come in this one. But the proof has been that Ohio State has played their two best games in the playoffs, and to expect Texas we're just waiting for them to play their best game and boom, it happens. I don't think you can do that.
No, this is not a thing where it's like, well, the best news is that we haven't seen this team do this yet. That's like saying, boy, the great news for Ohio State is they're overdue for a kickoff return for a touchdown. Yes, by about 10 to 14 years, yes. I'm not expecting that. And I say that we're 1 week removed from Ohio State having by far its most dominant game of the season against the best team it has played all season. So you can have those outlier performances, but those performances are called outlier performances because they're not normal. They stand far apart from the normal performance. And I look at Texas, and I'm not sure. I think there's certainly spots on the field where they have advantages over Ohio State, but I don't think I look at Texas and say they are going to absolutely dominate the game in the trenches on both sides. Or, boy, there's no way Ohio State can match up with their passing game. Or there's no way that that Ohio State can throw the ball against this Texas secondary. I think there's spots. Janae Barron in the corner, won the Thorpe Award, very, very good. I think it's going to be very hard to throw at him. Malik Muhammad's on the other side of the field. He's fine. He's not. Right. He notably did not win the Thorpe Award. There are spots. They've got two very good safeties. They've got some very good linebackers. All that's true. I think it's going to be very difficult for Ohio State to move the ball consistently on this Texas defense all game long. And it's not going to be 34-0 in the second quarter. I hate to tell you that. But I don't know how well Texas can move the ball against the Ohio State defense. They haven't played their best game yet. Well, I don't think they're probably going to play it against the Ohio State defense. So I think that's specious reasoning, Tony.
But in terms of what defensive player needs to play their best game, I think if Matthew Golden is shut down or just does not have a big game, and it's Denzel Burke and Davison Igbinosun containing him, then you're going to need Isaiah Bond to do something or Silas Bolden, and those two guys have not been consistent enough to do that. So if there's one guy in the passing game that you want to shut down, it is Matthew Golden, their top receiver, and if that's Denzel Burke doing that, then that might be my answer. I do think if Cody Simon has another game like he's had these first two playoff games, he's going to be stopping the run. He's going to be stopping Quinn Ewers on the blitz. So those are two good guys to pick. The interior of the defensive line, and really the entire defensive line, if they're stopping the run, I don't think there's much reason to expect Texas to be able to run. We've said this before that they do a lot of outside zone runs. Ohio State is very, very good against the outside zone. So what Texas does well is what Ohio State stops well. So I guess then it becomes, what does Steve Sarkisian do to counter that? And might be literal counters.
Yes, yeah.
How do you counter what you do well and what Ohio State does well? And he's one of the best in the business at figuring that stuff out. But then Jim Knowles has so many pieces to this defense that they're veteran enough that you can change on the fly after one series and adjust. So it's going to be fascinating to watch those two coordinators go at it.
And the one area where I think Ohio State might have a little bit of an advantage there is overage, and that's a word we've used a bunch on this show the last month or so, because Ohio State has not had to play 4-quarter games. Texas has had to play. They played a 4-quarter game and then overtime against Georgia. They played the better part of a 4-quarter game against Clemson, and then they played a 4-quarter game plus a couple overtimes against Arizona State. So you got to figure they were getting to the point where they were reaching down into the bag of tricks, and there was not a whole lot left at the bottom of that bag. So with Ohio State, the Tennessee game was functionally over in the middle of the third quarter, and they were playing second stringers for a lot of the fourth quarter. So you're not running all your clever iterations on your previous plays in the fourth quarter of that game. When it's 34-0 in the second quarter, you're not digging way down into the bag of tricks in the fourth quarter. They were just trying to run the clock out in the fourth quarter. So Ohio State probably has a little bit more left in the bottom of that bag of tricks, both on offense and defense here, than Texas probably does. That's one thing that you might see. Sark is a great play caller. Sark knows more about offense than virtually anyone else on the planet. Ryan Day and Chip Kelly also know quite a bit about offense, and they have not had to dig quite as deep in that bag.
No, they have not. So there you go. There's listening questions, episode number 2. I believe we still have some more to go.
Okay, we'll see what that one is.
So we will eventually get those to you. Hit the bell to be notified. Hit the thumbs up on this if you're watching on YouTube. We would appreciate that. Subscribe to the channel if you've not yet done so. And of course, find us at BuckeyeHuddle.com. First month, just $4.99. Check us out there on the Buckeye Huddle message board presented by Jeffrey Reese Columbus. Thank you all for tuning in, and we'll talk to you guys later.